Screen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me call to order the Planning Commission meeting for October 11th, 2010. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Adam?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Lunn?
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Here.
Chair Grumney?
Here. Now is the time for public comment. At this time, any person may address the Commission regarding a city planning matter that is not on this evening's agenda. Should the Commission wish to discuss an issue raised by a member of the public, the issue will be referred to staff for scheduling on a future agenda. Please note, anyone who'd like to speak under the general comments or the public comments portion of an agenda item must complete a white speaker's card and file it with the recording secretary before the public comment portion of the agenda is called. Keep in mind the speaker's remarks should be addressed to the Commission as a whole and not to an individual commissioner or staff member. Speakers will have a time limit which will be announced, and the podium has indicator lights, and the timer light changes yellow when you have 1 minute remaining. Mr. Town, do you have any announcements or continuances you'd like to make at this time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a supplemental packet for tonight's commission meeting, and it has to do with case 6B. That is the case with California Fine Wine and Spirits as the applicant. It contains certain revisions to conditions of approval recommended for that case, which staff will review during their presentation. Thank you.
I have one public comment card this evening, and it's from Mr. Nick Kidway.
I begin in the name of God, most beneficial, most merciful. My name is Nick Iqbal Kidwai. I'm a resident of Newberry Park. And last time I checked, Chair, still Director of Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks. A real white shot now, I guess. That's good. They don't have to see my face. But I would like TOTV to help me with the overhead again. There it is. Thank you so much. That's the minutes from the 27th, the last Planning Commission meeting, highlighted. So I'd like to show the backside. See, those are the speakers that spoke about the wireless issue. And I've been saying this for a long time, but maybe this is a better time because some of the people on the council and planning commission would like to get raises, move up, be elected. I mean, as an immigrant, not only an immigrant, just as any ordinary citizens, I mean, if you don't have the proper agenda, the planning chair so eloquently gave the rules of how people speak over here. Minutes, I mean, if you put one sentence or put a paragraph, you have to put something, but you folks put nothing, and you will vote on it, all 5 of you. I mean, so that's why anybody, in my humble opinion, that votes on these un-American, authoritarian minutes, that somebody, someday, when there's a lawsuit, and somebody wants to look at the minutes and they cannot find it because the recordings are kept only for 90 days. This city will be in a lawsuit, and the taxpayers will be in hock for a lot of money, just like we are for the redevelopment agency. TOTV, if you can help me again. I showed some cartoons. I don't have the time this time to show the redevelopment agency, but this is the booklet that I gave to the Planning Commission, redevelopment.com. Internet is so beautiful. I mean, if you want to learn about the internet, you can find that. If you go on the LA Times, you'll find that our redevelopment agency, which this Planning Commission is responsible for, is as much as all the cities combined. I mean, it's worse than Pac-Man. $20 million a year, and where does it go? I mean, it's not just angle parking. It's just disgusting how our taxes are being screwed, and people are sleeping right now. I mean, they are watching NFL football is on right now, I think, right? I mean, that's more important than the Planning Commission. That's why this chamber is empty. TOTV, sorry to make you work so hard, but you are good people. This is the Westlake Hospital, TOTV. This is the Westlake Hospital, which is boarded up. The Planning Commission and the City Council, I think the City Council unanimously, they had to recuse some of themselves, voted to ruin the central Thousand Oaks. With all the traffic and all that, when there is a perfectly good hospital that these people, took over and said that they were going to keep it open. And yet, this Planning Commission also, including the so-called slow growth people, just stab the citizens in the back. It's just disgusting, but don't elect them. I mean, don't promote them. And my last, but this is one of the proposed signs for the Thousand Oaks Auto Mall that we really don't need. This was supposed to be heard at the next Planning Commission meeting. But guess what? I won't do the clucking like a former city council member did who was promoted to a supervisor. I mean, why is it being moved up? Because there's an election, and we don't want to have a controversial issue brought up before you to fill up the chambers. Just have an empty chamber with no important issues before you. This sign, in fact, I was one of the people, luckily, to be on the committee, and I've never criticized committees because the committees is where the work is done. There's there's no politicking, no grandstanding, and it's very fair, democratic process, but not this committee. The staff moved the committee time so that only retired people without jobs could attend. So instead of 22 people, only 10 people, 11 people attended. They did not advertise it on the city's website, and they did not believe in a consensus. In fact, in the past, if there has been a difference, there has been a minority report. There are at least 2 other people besides me that are completely opposed to the sign, but you won't hear that in the staff report. I would appreciate if any of you, really want to uphold your oath that you should write a letter to the council to have another meeting of the committee to discuss this rather than make a mockery of the democratic process. I will really appreciate it, Commissioner Adam. Thank you. Thank you for looking at me. I appreciate you'll do something.
Thank you. Will the Secretary please call case SUP 2010-70342?
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6A regarding case SUP 2010-70342. Applicant RSAC Unlimited request to allow the operation of a used car dealership in conjunction with existing storage of private collection of vehicles within an industrial complex. Location 2630 Townsgate Road, Building 5.
Thank you very much. The staff report this evening is given by Mr. Haider Alawami from our Community Development Department. Good evening, Mr. Alawami.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. I'd like to direct your attention to the monitor for staff's presentation. As mentioned, special use permit case number 2010-7342 is a request to allow the sale of luxury cars in conjunction with an existing storage of private collection within an industrial complex. And the applicant is RSAC Unlimited, and the location is 2630 Townsgate Road. This is an aerial photo of the location. It's off Townsgate, Building 5, the V-shaped building. The applicant is occupying 3 suites within that building. Here's a picture of the building of Townsgate Road. In evaluating this request, the existing storage of cars, the private collection of cars has been at the site for 10 years, which is a permitted use in the M1 zone, which is where the industrial complex is zoned. The applicant desires to sell vehicles at the site, and because of that, it requires a license from DMV and approval from the City of Thousand Oaks. Auto sales lots or used car dealership in the M1 zone requires a special use permit to be reviewed and considered by the Planning Commission. The sales of those vehicles will be by appointment only. There is no outdoor display of the cars in the parking lot. Everything is contained within the suites inside the building. And staff considers, because of these issues or criteria, is that the sale of the cars is incidental to the existing storage of the private collection of cars. There's adequate parking in the parking lot because the parking ratio for warehouse requires less parking than what the original project was approved for, which is an assembly and industrial use. There will be a minor repair and maintenance of the vehicles, which are incidental, and it's going to be interior. It's going to be inside the suites. There is no work outside of the building. The proposed use not expected to have any adverse impact on existing businesses or adjacent properties. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve special use permit 2010-70342 based on the findings and the conditions within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Yes, Commissioner Adam.
Hi, Mr. Alawami. Can you tell me how many cars are stored there now? Just out of curiosity.
I would refer that to the applicant's representative,
Okay.
Mr. Cohen.
All right. And did they indicate to you, how many they sell a month there or a year? Or
My understanding is 1 or 2 cars a year.
1 or 2 cars a year?
Yeah. But
Okay.
again,
All right. I have to ask this one other question, mainly for my own edification. The applicant's filing for a special use permit. What did we charge for that?
let me check the file.
You can give me a ballpark number.
It's around $4,000.
$4,000. And did we charge them to appear before us as well? Or is that included in the
It's
$4,000?
included in the filing fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? If not, we'll go to the applicant. Our applicant this evening, RSAC Unlimited, is being represented by Mr. Tom Cohen. Mr. Cohen, if you could state your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair Grumney and Planning Commissioners. My name is Tom Cohen. I'm a resident of the City of Thousand Oaks. And I want to humbly disagree with the speaker earlier. I think these are important issues before you tonight. And we appreciate your time, the energy, and that you devote to doing the people's work. So I want to first thank Hayter and city staff for their work on this. The conditions that are before you tonight we find to be acceptable. Staff's report to you is complete, and we don't have anything further to add, so I'm available to respond to questions, and I'll do that right now with Planning Commissioner Adam. The number of cars sold, on average, 1 to 2 per year. These are special collection of vehicles. You don't see them very often. There is probably, this is a ballpark, about 40 cars within the 3 warehouse spaces on display, and it's really more, it's designed as a collection for people to come and look at this personal collection. Hopefully that responds to your questions, and I'm available to respond to anything else you may have.
Do we have any other questions of the applicant? Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen.
My pleasure.
For the public record, we don't have any speaker cards or comment cards. Therefore, we'll go back to staff for any comments.
Staff has no further comments.
Is there any additional questions of staff? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and be available for discussion and/or motion. Commissioner Lund.
Thank you, Chair Grumney. I want to congratulate the staff on the preparation of this report. It was well done. I am a car guy. There's no vehicles outside. There's a proper way to store these vehicles. It complies with the M1 zoning. There's been storage of luxury vehicles in this facility for over 10 years. And this project requires less parking than if we were to see this thing back in 1970. I think that was alluded to earlier. So with that, I am very pleased and to move staff's recommendation.
Comments to the motion? Commissioner Adam?
I do have one. Yeah, absolutely support Commissioner Lund's motion. You know, we got a private collection. It's been here for 10 years. There's no advertising. They don't put cars outside. There's no expansion of the building. There's nothing. It's just basically no change from what's happening right now. I'll give you a little editorial comment here, whether you happen to want it or not. As planning commissioners, and you probably all have shared this experience, we're asked constantly, you know, how can we make the permit process more business friendly in Thousand Oaks? Well, considering what we're looking at tonight, I'm not quite sure the $4,000 charge was necessary to have this permit granted. That's just my personal opinion. Yes, in some cases, certainly, and I understand the municipal code calls for this special use permit, but for the fact that literally nothing is being done, it seems to me that $4,000 is a lot of money to pay for this permit. There you have it.
Any additional comments to the motion? If not, any final comments to your motion, Commissioner?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, could you please vote, please?
Motion passed 5-0.
Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Will the Secretary please call case PPD 2010-70330.
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6B regarding case SUP 2010-70330, applicant California Fine Wine and Spirits, request to allow on-site consumption of alcoholic beverages, tasting only, location 394 North Moore Park Road.
Thank you very much. The staff report this evening is given by Mr. Joey Lynn from the Community Development Department. Good evening, Mr. Lynn.
Good evening. For your second case consideration, an SUP application has been filed, SUP 2010-70330, to allow alcohol tasting at a beer, wine, and spirit store. I may direct your attention to the screen. Locations at 394 North Moore Park Road at an existing shopping center of Moore Park Road. This is a view of the front elevation. The applicant will be taking over an existing retail store. Presently, the retail store is between two stores. First, the one on the north would be the Best Buy store, and the one on the to the north would be Ross. This is an example of the tasting area that has been proposed at the store. The store will be located, the tasting area will be located to the center of the store. The proposed tasting at the general tasting area is in the designated area at the center of the store, approximately 13.5 feet times 15 feet, which is approximately about 200 square feet. There's also a tasting class at the back of the store, and that will be offered between 1 to 2 per month. The proposed hours, the tasting hours will be the same as the proposed store, which would be 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. However, the actual tasting is between noon to 6 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, and noon to 4 p.m. on Sundays. The limits on the total amount would be for distilled spirits, 3/4 ounce per customer per day, and as for wine and beer, it'll be a total of 3 ounces per customer per day. There's also a limit on the individual pours, which would be a 1/4 ounce per pour for distilled spirits, and for wine and beer, it'll be a maximum of 1 ounce per pour. As for the individual tasting classes to the rear of the store, the limit would double, which would allow for 6 ounces of tasting for wine and beer, and for distilled spirits, it'll be 1.5 ounce. As for the conditions have been required that only trained personnel to supervise the tasting, both at the general tasting area and also at the classroom. The police department also has received and approved the project. There's also an additional memo that's in front of you, and it serves as a clarification to a couple of conditions on the staff report. Condition number 12, the tasting activity area and supervision. The wording has been added that a general tasting or to the classroom area for tasting. This is trying to separate the two areas so that there's a differentiation of the tasting area to the center, which will be the general tasting, and also the wine tasting area that offers classes, which is to the back of the store. Condition number 13, the limitation on tasting consumption. That's also a further clarification on the cap of the tasting that will be allowed to the two different spaces. The first space being that the general tasting area to the center of the store, which will be limited to 3 ounces of beer or wine. However, for the tasting classes that's offered to the back, the amount actually is allowed to be double of that. Condition number 18, the tasting hours, just the wording of the wine, beer, and liquor tasting, just to add that beer. Condition number 19, it's a further condition and clarification and condition for the designated of the tasting area that are rather than placing a permanent minimum of 42-inch high barrier, would be just a minimum 42-inch barrier, and that it should be approved by the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, rather than from the city's requirement of a permanent barrier. Condition number 20, the licensing requirement is a further expansion that the applicant should receive a valid license for the tasting from the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. This ends staff's presentation. Staff recommends approval of SUP 2010-70330 based on the findings subject to conditions contained in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Is there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Reynolds.
Good evening. You kept on referring to the classroom at the back of the store, and there is a door at the back of the store. I have two questions. First of all, will the employees be required to park at the back of the store? And will any of the public, especially attending the classes, be allowed to use that entrance exit?
The shopping center's condition doesn't require that the staff needs to be parked at the back. However, staff's understanding most of the employees will be parked to the back of the store. As for the use of customers to the back, using the back of the store, perhaps the applicant could further expand, but staff's understanding that the classroom, the customers were coming from the front of the store rather than coming from the back store, the delivery area.
Well, I was just concerned because there's senior housing right behind the center, the Caneo Future and the Florence Jan's, I think, apartments are behind there, and didn't know after people have attended a class and tasted, and because they're allowed to consume more than in front, if there would be a problem with them leaving and entering through that door. That was my concern. So maybe we'll have some commission discussion on it. Thank you.
Any additional questions? I just have one. Mr. Lynn, I'm not sure that I followed you correctly. When you spoke about the different conditions, could you reiterate if there's any of the conditions that are changed from what is currently printed in our books? I just want to make sure that there was not a change that you spoke this evening that's not written down here. That's all I'm looking to follow. Is everything of the conditions current that's in my book right now?
Yes, the most, I think specifically for condition number 13, allowing the tasting classes to have that double the amount of tasting. Okay. Versus the general tasting area.
Okay.
That would be the...
Thank you very much for the clarification. Okay. We'll now go to our applicant, which is California Fine Wines and Spirits, who's being represented this evening by Mr. Phil Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong, welcome, and if I can ask you if you could state your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name real estate for Total Wine and More, and will be representing California Fine Wine and Spirits as the applicant. I'm a resident of Chevy Chase, Maryland. The store will operate as Total Wine and More. We currently have 66 stores in 11 states, and we'll have 69 by the end of the year. The company will do over $900 million in sales. We are a wine superstore. We've spent a lot of time tonight and certainly on the report talking about tasting, which is a tiny, tiny part of our business. We're in the business of selling wine, off-premise consumption. We're a big retail store. We've signed a lease to take over the former Office Max space, a 23,000 square foot store. That's very typical with our store size, which is going to be 20 to 25,000 square feet. We carry 8,000 different wines, 2,000 different spirits, 1,000 beers. So we are a retailer. We are very excited to be the opportunity to come to Thousand Oaks. We think it's a very dynamic market. We think our product will be a good fit. We think our concept is a good fit. It's an upscale concept, well-educated customer. We are great believers in education as a concept. We train our staff to sell a bottle of wine to a customer at Total Wine. That person has to undergo 150 hours of classroom training. They need to understand all the French, all the Italian, all the Napas, and that's certainly a big part of it. We will be applying for 2 licenses with the California ABC, a Type 21 license, which allows for off-premises consumption, kind of the standard retail license, and the other is the Type 42, which allows for on-premise consumption, and we use it strictly for tasting purposes. The Type 42 license, at least from Total Wine and More's perspective, comes with a lot of baggage because it essentially allows you to operate as a bar or a restaurant, and that is not what we want to do, but to be able to do tastings on site, we have to acquire this license. And so I think some of the conditions in staff's report, and I want to thank Joey for his effort on the report. We are prepared to accept the conditions, other than I would like to talk about condition 13 on the tasting a little bit further. It is my understanding that those limitations are put in place to essentially prevent this property and this location from becoming a bar. We have zero interest in being in the bar business. We don't want the liability. We don't want to deal with intoxicated people. We just want to be in the retail business and offer limited tastings as part of it. I think the condition prevents us from doing kind of tastings we like to do. In our classroom, which we call the wine education room, we run 17 classes throughout the year. These classes are going to be themed, so there's an evening in Napa, an evening in Tuscany, great wines of France, things like that. And we typically will taste, it's an hour and a half long multimedia presentation conducted by one of our employees in the store who's an expert in that particular area, and we'll typically offer 8 wines to taste. The instructor does all the pouring, they're limited pours, but we still do 8 tastes. And that's, again, that's not a big part of our business. We just do it because it's fun and it helps educate the customer, and we use it as a little bit of a marketing effort as well. Kind of the tastings that are done within the store, they're usually done Friday, Saturday, and Sunday during limited hours. We would typically taste 4 wines, 2 whites, 2 reds, sometimes a sparkling would be in. And that area is designated from the store. You have to be 21 to enter it. IDs are checked, as they are everywhere throughout the store. We have a very aggressive policy on that. And again, we would like some flexibility on kind of that condition 13 in terms of the pouring. And if the issue is to prevent us from becoming a bar, I would certainly like to stipulate that. I think there is perhaps language that we could craft that if we're going to use a Type 42 license, that at this location we would use it only for tastings, and we would that license could not be used to operate a bar, a club, a restaurant, a tavern, any kind of associated businesses like that. And we would stipulate that, or further something else that could be added, that we would not sell beer, wine, and spirits for on-premises consumption by glass, bottle, drink in amount greater than 3 ounces, 4 ounces, something like that. Just we like to conduct our tastings like we do at our other stores around the country and here in California. We don't want to be a bar. We understand that that's what I believe to be the constraint is, and we would certainly do everything we could to agree not to be a bar, because that's not what we want to be. And Commissioner Reynolds, if I could just answer your specific question, that door is a emergency fire door only. No customers or employees would go through that door, only in case of if the place is on fire. So it's not an entrance door for typical use. We will ask our employees to perhaps park in the back on certain days, maybe Saturday and Sunday. The shopping center does not have a specific policy on that, although in our lease it does say a policy could be created. But all customers will come through the front door and exit through the front door. There would never be any separate entrance. And again, I just want to stipulate that tasting is a tiny part of what our business is, and I'm available to answer any questions if I could.
Thank you. Is there questions of the Commissioner Lund?
Thank you, Chair Grumney. Good evening, sir. Thanks for coming
Thank you.
in here this evening. I hope that you're enjoying our weather versus your weather back home.
We actually had a nice weekend, but it's much better out here. Thank you.
I wanted to talk to you about your comments about condition 13.
Yes.
What is it in the condition that you're concerned about? Is it the amount of pours, or?
It's the 3 pours, the 3-pour limit. I think my concern is that first of all, it kind of limits what we want to do in our tasting, and certainly limits even double the amount, which is would makes it difficult for us to operate the class like we prefer to operate it. And I think it also, my concern is we have to enforce that in the store. And if I'm, putting an employee in the situation where did I pour the 3rd one or the 4th one, or is it I'm just a little bit concerned about enforcement of that. We certainly want to abide by, the spirit of this special use permit. It's a privilege to have, just as the ABC licenses are a privilege for us to have. But that's my concern, just the limitation of basically the number.
Okay, so I get this clear, you're not concerned about the amount of the pour, the quarter ounce and versus the 1 ounce?
Correct.
Okay, so you testified earlier to the fact that you thought that the reasonable thing in the company practice is eight pours, correct?
That would be when we're conducting one of the classroom events or one of the education classes, kind of that the tasting that we do in the kind of the big part of the store, for lack of a better term. Those would usually be between usually 4, sometimes 5 wines, and again we're limiting that amount anyway. I mean, I think based on how the store operates, most people will try 2, maybe 3. And again, we're not interested in seeing how much free samples we can give out. We just do it as a tasting and really do control that ourselves. But excuse me, I'm just trying to get some flexibility on the limitation.
And if this was sometime in mid-December to late December and it was a perfect world, what is it that you would like to see?
I would like to see a condition that allows us to do tastings, but gives the community the assurance that we're never going to morph into a bar or a wine bar or some other type of situation.
No, I appreciate that. We just need to get some clarity here. Our staff report says what it is, and we have to make a decision based on your testimony and the evidence that's before us here this evening. How is it that you would implement in a perfect world, if this condition was amended, how would you control now the numbers of pours that you had just talked about with your employees and your customers?
It's typically done by the staff and supervised. Again, most customers will only, and there may be other unique situation where a customer may want to have a second sample of it, but usually you get one. We, depending on the state, sometimes it's in a wine glass. There is, it's a half ounce or an ounce max, just depending on what the state is. And we would control that to probably, I don't think at a store level we would really want to see a customer have more than 4 samples.
But the regulation of that would be the responsibility of the person doing the pouring, is that correct?
It is, correct. And they are rigorously trained. Again, tasting in itself we're just trying to offer product to the customer. With it comes potential liability, which we have no interest in having. Also with it is, inebriated customers, which we also don't want. So it's something that kind of, in the 66 stores throughout the country, and again, we've set down some pretty good policies on that, being a substantial company. We really are able to control that, I think, effectively at the store.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adam.
Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like you're good with the 3 with the 3 pours in the tasting area. It's that your concern is about the classes.
Certainly there's 2 parts of it. I am concerned about the classes because we do offer 8 wines, and it's
okay.
And
so they're going to double it for the classes. That would be 6 pours. So if it was increased to 8 pours, that's 8 ounces. What is that, about a glass of wine?
Yeah,
give or take
an average glass of wine. And they're encouraged to taste, and we go through quite a procedure about what is tasting, and you go through that process. We have spill buckets available, and we certainly, again, we're not in the. We want to taste. We're not a bar. We don't want people to sit and drink on premises.
I understand. I just think that the staff, and we've had cases like this before, and I think the staff is suggesting some sort of a regimen to follow, that's all.
But I guess my question is it because you don't want you don't want this use to morph into something that it's not? And one of the ways to control that is to do, limit the tastings and limit what you can do. And I understand that, and I certainly appreciate that. Again, we don't want to be in that business, but what we want to do is I think, just have some flexibility And again, this is not going to be our first and only store. We really do run this with a very strong procedure, and there is a process to it that people are trained and taught how to do it. Mm-hmm. And again, it's simply bad business to overpour and give lots of free samples out. That's not what we want to do. We want to, give the customer a potential taste, have them move on.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand completely. You don't want inebriated customers. You don't want to give away all the stock. But it seems like you're suggesting that you would leave it to the discretion of the wine class teacher, for lack of a better word. And I guess, when you throw in the human element, then things could go awry, I suppose.
I can only tell you that we run hundreds of classes a year throughout our stores. I've not heard of any incident where we've had any issue with that. You're right, it is human element, and that's why we train people aggressively. We had over 18 million transactions last year. We had 0 sales to minor. We had 105 sting operations in our stores, 100% compliance. The company gave $500,000 in bonuses to staff and management for the prevention of sales to minor. The confiscation of false IDs, the arrests of people attempting to buy. We take, we're a responsible, serious retailer. And again, tasting is a tiny part of our business. And we want to do it well. We want to do it responsible. There's just too much liability to be sloppy and poor about it, do a poor job with it. These licenses, as I said, are a privilege to have, and we respect that. And just like the special use permit here is a privilege to get.
Oh, I have no doubt. Sounds like you have a good track record. So how would you like to see it phrased then for tasting classes?
Again, the issue to me is the purpose of the restriction to prevent us from becoming a bar and morphing into that. If it is, then I think there's other language that some of it's already in place, other that we can perhaps suggest. That if you have a Type 42 license, that we would use this license for tasting, limited tasting only, and would not use the Type 42 license to become a bar, a wine bar. We would stipulate that there would never be any separate entrances to go into the wine, any of the specified tasting areas. So some of that's already been controlled. The size, it's limited, there's no separate entrance. You have limited hours of operation that aren't conducive to be a bar. I think we have enough controls internally that we can control the tasting, the pour, the conduct of customers, the training of our staff. I think if the issue is, gosh, you've got this license, you can consume on premise, what's to prevent you from coming something else that you're not representing here tonight? And I think there are things that can be done, conditions that can really prevent that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Fisher?
So I guess it comes down to is you don't feel there should be any restrictions put on you.
I'm willing to accept some. I don't want to make it so absolute that it's kind of all or nothing. I do understand your concern. I really do. I was hoping you would consider it if the issue is we become a bar or a wine bar. That's not what we want to be. I think there are conditions that could prevent that. If it absolutely is a tasting restriction and you're concerned about the number and amount, I would like to propose perhaps if that's the direction we have to go, maybe 8 ounce total. And let us control the number. We can certainly put signs up that says, number of tastings not to exceed 8 ounces. And I think with some of the other conditions is the correct term, the conditions that have been placed, I think that would allow us to operate internally and hopefully give you the assurance that we're not going to become a bar.
Yeah, I don't. My personal view, I don't think you're I agree you aren't going to be out there looking to become a bar or some other type of thing. I think what I'm sensing from the other commissioners is, okay, what do you want? Certainly not a free-for-all. So what would you propose, which now you're proposing a total of 8 ounces, and you control, whether it's 1 pour or 12 pours to equal that 8 ounces. Is that correct?
If tasting itself were an issue and you wanted to control it, I actually wrote this up at Starbucks before I came over. If you want my best case of what I would like it to read,
yes.
It's not very pretty, but I did draft it up, and it probably does. If you'd like me to submit it, or I could read it, I'm happy to do either.
Why don't you do both?
Okay. This would essentially be condition 13, and it would be called limitation on type 42 license and on tasting. And it would read, the use of a type 42 license or its equivalent shall be used for tasting purposes and activities only as an incremental use to the retail off-premise sales at the site, and may not be used to operate a bar, wine bar, tavern, club, restaurant, or similar uses where wine, beer, or spirits are sold by glass, bottle, or drink for on-premise consumption in a quantity of greater than 4 ounces. And again, I think supporting that limitation are the hours of operation, the fact that one of the conditions is there's no live music. We've limited the areas where tasting may come. We would stipulate there's no separate entrances to the tasting areas. And condition 11, which is a general condition, which is the ABC, we have to abide by all the laws of the state of California, the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission. And there also would be number 15 condition, which prohibits unauthorized changes. So I think all those things in conjunction would be what would be my best case scenario.
So what you just proposed, quantity greater of 4 ounces. Now, is that 4 ounces per pour, or is that 4 ounces all pours?
That would be basically per pour. So the purpose of that language is to say that we're not going to sell it by glass, by bottle, by drink. So we would it'd be a preventative condition that would basically result in us not becoming a bar. But we would have the ability to do our tastings, our limited pours, as we do in all our other stores around the country, which I believe we manage effectively and smartly.
So with what you just read, you would not cap it at a total of 8 ounces?
I would not.
So 4-ounce pours, you could have 15 pours of 4 ounces.
That's not what I would propose, and we would not do that. I mean, it's actually just the opposite, is that we would not, there's really, I'm just trying to limit it to tasting, and there's a condition to that. I use this particular language thinking of that's what a bar would do. They would try to sell a bottle or a glass or a drink, and if you limit it to greater than 4 ounces, then you've essentially stopped a bar from operating.
Right. I guess where I'm being thrown off is previously you said you could agree to a total of 8 ounces. 10 pours could make up that 8 ounces. So now with this one, you're 4 ounces per pour, but there's no limit.
We wouldn't do 4-ounce pours. It was essentially done where beer, wine, or spirits are sold by glass, bottle, or drink for on-premise consumption. I'm kind of moving away from the tasting, and I'm trying to put conditions on not becoming a bar. So I'm trying to put limitations on conditions that would give you assurance that we're not going to become a bar.
Yeah, again, that's not my concern. I don't believe you want to become a bar, so I'm trying to get to a place where you can do what you want to do, and 4-ounce pours, unlimited based on, the guy or a girl that's doing the pouring would monitor that.
We could limit to 1-ounce pours for wine and beer. We don't do spirits tasting or liquor tastings in the store.
And would you have a cap on that?
Again, that's something I'd like to control in the store, but if we need to move on tonight, I can agree to 8 ounces total.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming this evening. I have a question for you.
Okay.
A couple of them. When you're at your store, when you are doing wine tasting, do you have some container to expel the wine if you so choose?
We do, yes.
Do you find it's a common practice when people are tasting wine that really what they are trying to do is taste it and then taste another wine and expel it?
I think it's mixed. Some people do taste just to taste, and they're not used to expelling it. But I think certainly a great number of customers do that, and we certainly encourage them to do that.
Okay. In addition, can you tell me what the average cost, just the average cost of a bottle of wine at your store? I know that's a tough one to do, but there's a reason I'm asking that question.
I would say the average cost is probably $18 to $20.
Okay. And do you find that in being able to market those wines and those wines that are above that, the tasting becomes an important element in order to be able to market it?
It's an extremely important element, and that's part of the education as well. A lot of people want to know what's the difference between a $10 bottle of wine, a $20 bottle of wine, a $100 bottle of wine, and so that's part of what the education allows people to do.
Okay. And if I'm kind of understanding your type of business, I'm afraid to speak the name of a competitor because
You're welcome to. I'm happy to address it.
Well, I'd like to ask you, who would you say in the surrounding communities is your biggest competitor for your type of business that you're bringing here?
It's very diverse. Certainly the supermarkets, Ralph, Vaughn's, Costco does a good job in wine. Beverages and More is probably our BevMo is probably our best known competitor here in California. Our businesses are a little bit different. Total Wine, we're going to sell 60 to 65% of our sales are in wine. In Beverages and More, it's probably spirits is probably 40% of their business, followed by beer. So wine is a little smaller percentage in their business than it is in ours.
At BevMo, do they offer wine tasting?
I believe they do, yes.
In Simi Valley, do you know at all what their parameters are?
I think they typically taste 4 to 5 wines. I don't know if it...
What they have. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot at this time. Okay, that's all the questions that I have. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? If not, could we go back to staff? Oh, excuse me, I apologize. We do have one public speaker card, Mr. Nick Kidway. Good evening, Mr. Kidway. You know the routine. If you could state your name and city of residence. And this
Nick
evening,
Iqbal.
you have 5 minutes.
Oh, wonderful. Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newberry Park. Still Director concerned citizens of Thousand Oaks, Honorable Chair. First of all, with all due deference, I would ask, since you have canceled the meeting on the 25th, to invite these folks and have a continuation of the hearing till November 8th, because, I mean, at a minimum, there should have been 3 pourings at this meeting. How can you really determine, in all honesty, what is the correct pour, right? So, without the pouring, how can you really vote on it? In fact, I wonder if there is staff that is trained in this pouring, and I would really encourage that the staff, at least one staff member, should go and get trained so that you are able to really make the decisions in the proper fashion. I forgot if the TOTV can help me. That's the picture from the front, and now there's a close picture. This was one of my favorite stores, Office Max. Closed up, and I asked all these issues like the Commissioner, Vice Chair mentioned about the cost of the hearing we are in a free enterprise system, are monetary issues. And I know the Planning Commission in some ways is not really supposed to look at costs, and that's one of the reasons we are in the mess that we are in, that we have make-do work. That's what this is, make-do work. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that there's at least one Planning Commissioner that is a teetotaler like me, maybe more than one. And so how can you really, I cannot, I've never had a drink, so I cannot tell. I mean, if I would be tipsy in 5 or 7 or 9, I mean, what is required? The real bottom line is they are not going to give a freebie to freeloaders. I mean, they're going to just give enough to the right buyers. That's the bottom line. We don't need a grandfather planning commissioner looking over their shoulders. And what is ABC doing? I mean, why do we have duplication of services? I mean, this great country is just being destroyed slowly, Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam, this country is being destroyed from within. And these are the kind of things. That's why I showed this Office Max closing. I talked to just the minimum wage guy. I didn't even have to talk to the manager of Office Max. And I said, what happened? I mean, you're going out bankrupt? He said, no, sir. They are raising the rent, so it will be twice what it is in Oxnard. Twice what it is in Oxnard. So that's why go to Oxnard or Northridge. If we are victim of our own success in Thousand Oaks, gentlemen. And I would like, I mean, again, since the question was asked, how much are they paying for this hearing, which is just a completely bogus hearing? $4,000, is that the standard norm, right? I mean, it used to be $1,600, something like that. This is just another fancy way of taxing people. I mean, it's coming out from the bottles of these customers. But there's enough business there. And one of the things that you did not ask was how much does the able attorney charge on top of the $4,000? And this gentleman over here, I think he flew in from back east, and there's another staff member. So they have another $3,000 or $4,000 or maybe $5,000 of other indirect costs. I mean, this is what is destroying the American business. This is destroying Thousand Oaks businesses. I don't know how many of you knew Russ Goodenow, the Cal U rent on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. He closed shop because he said, I mean, it's not fun anymore. I mean, you have to deal with so many agencies. I mean, I'm 70, I'd rather go home. I mean, some of these people can do it. A lot of people cannot do it. I was going to do it myself, but it's important. I mean, since you are spending the time, you have no work to anyway. I mean, the next hearing is disgusting too. I mean, a restaurant that really doesn't need a hearing. I mean, it's interesting that a planning commissioner asked about the seniors and all that. I mean, for both the report, it says no comments were received. I mean, you don't have to be like a grandfather planning commissioner to look out for the interests of the residents. I mean, if the residents knew about it, in fact, you are not really improving the signage requirements so that people really know and bring them to the 21st century. You still have those big signs that people cannot read. And so that's another reason people do not know what's happening in their neighborhood. You have the time in number 10 tonight to talk about these kind of things so that bring the Planning Commission to the internet age. And I would like the staff to read the section 9-4.3702 under which you are holding this hearing. I mean, what does that say? I mean, are you going on tangents? I mean, that should be read by the staff members so that every planning commissioner knows what your rights are, what your responsibilities are, and what your duties are. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
I could like to pouring for somebody else.
Thank you. We'll now go back to city staff for any additional comments.
Staff would like to respond to a couple of applicants' questions and comments regarding about condition 13. The number of pours. The number of pours is really not. Just want to clarify. It's not really limited. I mean, it is limited in the sense that the amount is limited. On the general tasting area is limited to 3 ounces. However, it's not limited on the pours. It's limited on the maximum pour per pour. However, it's not limited on the number of pours as long as it doesn't reach 3 ounces. And as for the tasting area, it's maximum 60 ounces, although there's no limit on the number of pours, just on the amount of pour each. responding to the BevMo question on the limitations. BevMo tasting was approved back in 2002, and the floor plan at that time, BevMo does have a more of an enclosed area, and the square footage of that tasting area is about half the size of what's being proposed, which is about 100 square feet. There's no limitation on the wine tasting at that time. The concern of limiting that tasting, wine tasting into becoming a wine bar, staff does feel that by having a number of pours and the maximum number would prevent becoming a wine bar in the sense that it would limit on the pour, and there's no, in this case it won't be like a wine bar where the patrons will stay much longer than after tasting.
Any questions? Commissioner Fisher?
Okay, so considering, understand BevMo doesn't have any restrictions because they have a smaller area that they're doing this in. How did staff arrive at what we have in our staff report?
Perhaps I could add a few comments to the discussion at this point. We have granted tasting of wine and beer in other establishments besides BevMo, Trader Joe's, Cigars and More, Von Foss. All of those, I believe, and Mr. Lin can confirm this, but I'm pretty sure that all of those had limitations exactly as what staff had recommended tonight. These amounts, I should note, by the way, are intended, as the applicant surmised, to prevent this type of tasting from evolving into something other than tasting. That is the purpose. These amounts, these limits, in terms of the overall cap and the caps for distilled spirits versus beer and wine, are really within the jurisdiction of the city. These are not standards that have been imposed upon us by ABC. The amounts per pour, in fact, do come from ABC standards, but the total is staff's attempt to provide a reasonable cap on these pours, individually and in total, to try to minimize it in terms of the total amount of alcohol served and ensure that it remains simply a tasting operation. One unique aspect about this case before you tonight is that we have classes proposed tonight. We have not had classes proposed at the other establishments that I previously referred to. So that's a little bit of a new twist, and that is one of the reasons why in the revised condition number 13, staff suggested that for those classes, limits be double the amounts that are otherwise referenced. So if the commission did want to consider a higher limits, that's within your purview. Again, I should note that within these limits, there's a differentiation between beer and wine and distilled spirits, which I think was lost in some of the previous discussion by the applicant, so we need to be very clear on that. But that is the purpose of these standards. Apart from BevMo, we have imposed exactly similar standards on other businesses, and it's worked successfully. But those, again, do not have the tasting class component, so that's a little bit of a different twist. So perhaps I can add further comments later if so appropriate.
Commissioner Fisher, are you finished? Okay. Commissioner Reynolds.
I'm real curious what the police department feels about this, to increasing the limits. If, is it Senior Deputy Sleva? You're the one that gets calls, so.
Hi, good evening. Dennis Sleva, Senior Deputy, Thousand Oaks Police Department. When it comes to wine tasting, or we just had a business open up, Bomb Foss, law enforcement, the Thousand Oaks Police gets almost zero calls at these types of places. Our worries are, and that we're having some kind of major issues right now, are bars that provide live entertainment, dancing, and attract the younger crowd. Those are our main issues. Any places that have wine tasting, like I said, Bonfoss has got the liquor tasting. We're not seeing any issues with any of those places at all.
Okay, thank you. It's hard for me to decide this because I've never been wine tasting. Sounds like a good idea, but so I have no experience as far as how many you would want to taste. I think that we're looking at the right thing as far as the classes. I could see the classes being the amount increased, but I thank you, Senior Deputy.
Commissioner Lund.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I have a comment, so I'll wait till the comments portion. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Adam.
Yeah, well, seems what I'm hearing, especially from Mr. Lynn, is that the issue isn't so much the number of pours. The issue is how much do you let somebody drink, the quantity. And, we're suggesting, the staff is suggesting that, outside of the class, we limit it to 3/4 of an ounce of hard liquor or 3 ounces of wine or beer, and then inside the class it would be 6 ounces. Now that might be 4 pours, 8 pours, I don't know, but I can understand the logic of that. Where in this particular facility you would want to.
Commissioner Adam, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're at the portion of questions of staff.
Oh, yes.
As compared to discussion.
That's right.
Because we're not quite there yet. So do you have any questions for staff?
Do I have that right? It's a question of consumption, a consumption limit versus pours.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any additional questions? If not, we will go back to our applicant. You have 5 minutes for any additional comments that you'd like to make. Again, Mr. Armstrong, if you'd start again by stating your name and city of residence, please.
The Total Wine and More. I live in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Again, a couple of just points to conclude with. One, we're a retailer. Tasting is a tiny part of what we do. It's done as a way to help educate customers, to help sell product. Again, we don't want intoxicated people. We're going to certainly aggressively self-police that like we do in all our stores around the country. We are simply, I think, asking that, we not be at a competitive disadvantage. That's another point I wish to make. And again, I think there are a lot of conditions already in here, and I think by tweaking condition 13, you will effectively prevent a use at this location from becoming any type of bar situation. But I certainly thank everybody for their thoughtful comments, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight.
Any final questions of the applicant? Thank you again, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll go ahead and close the hearing and open up for commission discussion and/or motion. Commissioner Lund.
Thank you, Chair Brumney. I think obviously we should probably start with condition number 13, and I'll do this for the purposes of discussion only. I think that we've heard our testimony. The testimony is before us from the applicant in terms of what his intent and the intent of the business is, and really what the established, proven empirical data is according to the applicant with his experience nationwide. I'm not so sure. He's said numerous times he does not want to become a bar. I'm not so sure that we need to get in the business of telling him how to run his business in specifics, as long as he's complying with the rules of ABC and within the confines of good legal behavior as outlined by the police department. So I'm not so sure that, and I'm a court-certified alcohol and drug expert myself. I have some issues with 13 strictly on the grounds of, let's not get down into the business of the applicant, as long as the applicant is legal and is in compliance with what city rules and regulations are. So I want to start the discussion with that. And we'll work our way around to a motion.
Okay, some additional comments. Commissioner Adam?
I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner Lund. You know, we don't want to drill too far down into the everyday business of a company that we're happy to have here in Thousand Oaks. So are you, so you're not thinking about any consumption limit, though? I mean, as far as, you know, instead of the 6 ounces for the tasting classes, you'd move it to 8? Or you just...
Honestly, I'm not sure that the consumption limit, and I'm an expert on tasting, I'm really not for any limits. I think that is what the business, that's what they're in the business for. I'm certainly, definitely, and I've put a lot of people in jail for intoxication. So, I mean, if it gets to that point, they're obviously transgressed in the state and local law infractions. I think that what we need to concern ourselves, from my view, what I'm looking at this project is this a project that's compatible and in compliance with what city standards are, number one, and number two, I have an issue about drilling too far down in terms of limits, because we had a speaker here earlier tonight. Everybody handles alcohol differently, everybody. And I'd like to be able to say that, you know, that you burn off an ounce an hour no matter what you're doing, exercising, sleeping, or whatever. That's also not true. While generally it's true, it's also not an accepted fact. So I think I would go for being a little scrutinous and a little conservative on what we place as a restriction around the total intake of alcohol. Fully aware of the dangers of too much alcohol, but that's not what this application is about. In my mind, this application is about primarily retail sales, with tasting as an adjunct to those sales.
Right. Yeah.
As what other folks are doing.
Yeah,
So.
the tasting would enhance the sales, is the presumption. So then you would just eliminate 13.
If it was kind of towards the latter part of December, yes, I would eliminate it.
What?
Latter part of December, I'm trying to be non-discriminatory in terms of religious affiliations, but if it was a holiday time, I would say get rid of 13.
Yeah, right. I mean, from what I hear you saying, you wouldn't need 13. Okay.
Let me let Commissioner Reynolds add some comments.
I'm just kind of curious what this is going to do with the other approvals that we've given, Trader Joe's and the vineyard down here and other places around town, if we, let's say, eliminate 13.
Mr. Town, do you have some comments?
I would anticipate if the commission did eliminate 13, that the other businesses that had similar requirements or limits placed on them probably would request a modification of their permit to be consistent with what we're discussing right now.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I think what got my attention was Bevmo, a similar operation, not having any requirements, and when you're talking a level playing field, that's not a level playing field for similar businesses. On one hand, I was looking at, maybe limiting some of this made sense, but listening to the testimony from the police department, there haven't been any issues. This isn't their primary business. The applicant offered up, look, we'll put in there that we agree that we will never, pursue opening a bar or restaurant or whatever. And I think that's what staff's concerned with. That makes sense. Limiting to that. But when we're talking about playing on a level playing field, what's good for them is good for us over here. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I don't know about eliminating 13 or whether we incorporate in 15, limiting that they can't expand into a bar or restaurant, that type of thing.
I'm going to go and also add some additional comments. In regards to the statement being made about not being a bar, that's never what I think from my position I would be concerned about. I don't think it being a bar. I think what people are concerned about is public safety and whether or not you create an activity for which at some point in time can do harm for others. I think the testimony that we heard tonight from our police department in regards to this type of activity and that they have not, they're not getting any calls, I think is very compelling. Now, I say that as a person whose life has been touched by alcoholism. And for anyone who knows someone that you've had in your family with it, they're not usually going to a place to have a small taste of wine. So I'm also concerned that we get overly concerned about public safety where we're not taking the testimony that we're getting from the police department so that we end up handicapping a business that we would like to see thrive in the Conejo Valley. I think they will serve a benefit to the entire community. I know many people really appreciate being able to taste something that does become costly to purchase. So I think we, not only limit a local business, we also add traffic to our freeways because I do believe people who are investing, for example, for their wedding, who has a large wine purchase, do drive out to other areas so that they can taste prior to purchasing. Commissioner Lund, do you have some additional comments?
No, I don't, other than to say that to reemphasize that I am a lifelong public safety member, and I'm very concerned about people's lives and their behavior. And in furtherance of that, I also have been touched by alcohol. I lost a son due to an intoxicated driver. So I am very acutely aware of the dangers, and I don't see the dangers here. And so what we are missing here as a point of our discussion is probably a motion. So I will start with a motion to approve staff's recommendations with the deletion of condition number 13.
Comments to the motion? Commissioner Adam?
Yeah, just for clarity, the business of a level playing field also is kind of a compelling notion. So I am to understand then that BevMo has no number 13, so to speak, on their operation?
That's correct. That permit was granted in 2003 for wine and beer tasting operations. Since then, we have imposed these types of restrictions that I alluded to, but that, I believe, was our first tasting case. At that time, we don't have limits on it.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Reynolds?
And I will also support Commissioner Lund's motion.
Commissioner Fisher? Okay, I'll also make a comment that I am going to also support the motion. I also want to add that I don't feel a concern of other businesses coming and seeking something similar to this, again, on the basis of what we have heard from our law enforcement as far as this is not really the area that we need to be targeting because it is not affecting public safety. And then I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Lund for any further comments.
No further comments other than I appreciate the good discussion we had on this.
Yes, also that it was a great discussion. Could I ask you to vote, please?
Motion passed 5-0.
Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Will the Secretary please call case SUP 2010-70323.
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6C regarding SUP 2010-70323. Applicant Shalada Thai Corporation. Request to allow the on-site sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages, beer and wine, at an existing restaurant. Location 1774 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard.
Thank you very much. The staff report this evening is given by Mr. Matt Chang of the Community Development Department. Good evening, Mr. Chang.
Good evening, Chair Grimney and members of the Commission. And for your consideration, a special use permit application that's being filed requesting the on-site sale and consumption of a beer and wine in an existing restaurant located at 1774 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And this is the subject location, which is at the corner of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And what the applicant requesting to do is having the ability to serve and also sell the beer and wine at existing Thai food restaurant. And the project requires Planning Commission review because, according to the municipal code, if there's any residential property within the 400 feet radius of the restaurant serving beer and wine, you will require Planning Commission review and approval. And for the background information, this commercial building was built in 1968, and back in 2007, a development permit minor modification was approved to allow a 10% parking reduction as well as outdoor dining for the proposed restaurant, which is the current restaurant. And July 20, the applicant filed the special use permit application for your consideration. And this is the front view of the existing restaurant, and the entrance more to the right of the building. And this is a picture of the existing interior view of the restaurant. Staff has reviewed this request and determined that the applicant will maintain the same floor area, which is 1,800 square feet as the previous before they apply for this beer and wine license. Therefore, they're not increasing any outdoor dining or any dining spaces. And sale of beer and wine is incidental or secondary use to this restaurant. And regarding the location of this restaurant, the parking lot as well as the front entry actually facing Thousand Oaks Boulevard, so there will be no traffic impact to the back of the building as well as to the street behind it. And the nearest residential to the north will be behind the commercial development on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, such as 7-Elevens or other businesses. And the nearest residential unit to the south is approximately 200 feet away. But since, like staff mentioned, it, all the entrance as well as parking lot are facing or adjacent to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, staff does not anticipate any type of problem with this type of use. And for the hours operation, it's going to remain as a previous store business, which is Monday to Friday from 11:30 to 9:30 p.m. and from Saturday to Sunday is 12 o'clock till 9:30 p.m. And the Thousand Oaks Police Department has reviewed the request and does not object or oppose this project as long as the conditions are complied and installed with this project. And this project is exempt from secret review since it's a minor change to the existing restaurant. At the end, staff would like to recommend this Commission to approve SUP 2010-70323, subject to the findings and based on the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation, and staff is ready for any question.
Questions of staff? Commissioner Adam.
Thank you. Just a quick question on 9 hours of operation. Staff report says Hours of operation, well, there could be a noise problem, and therefore the hours have to be mitigated. Where do you anticipate a noise problem? And has the applicant agreed to this 9:30 closing time, which would seem to me to be kind of early?
Actually, that's the hours the applicant are proposing.
Oh, okay.
And it's the same thing as existing currently hours of operation as well. So they're not modifying any hours of operation.
Okay. The applicant's good with it then. Thanks.
Any additional questions? If not, we'll go ahead to the applicant. Our applicant this evening is Kalata Thai Corporation, and they're being represented this evening by P. Yan Art. I'm going to see how close I came to being able to pronounce your name. If I could ask you to state your name and city of residence for our record.
My name is Piana, and I'm from North Hollywood.
And do you have any statement that you'd like to make?
It's just like because when we apply for the beer and wine license, because the customer would like to have a Thai beer. Normally, for the main objective for our company, it's just for sale for Thai food. But for the beer and wine, to just like to fulfill customer satisfaction.
Do we have questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. I have one comment card that came in that's in favor, and it says, try their iced tea, it's the best. We'll now go back to city staff for any comments.
Staff has no comment this time.
Any additional questions? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open up for commission discussion and/or motion. Commissioner Reynolds.
Thank you. I think this is a perfect use and especially I think important for businesses to be able to offer beer and wine. I think nowadays people like to have a drink, and I don't know if you're going to serve American beers or if it'll just be Thai beer. But I know when I was in Japan, we sure drank a lot of that Japanese beer. Anyway, with that, I will move approval of SUP 2010-70323 with the conditions and findings as in the staff report.
Comments to the motion? If not, could we vote, please?
Motion passed 5-0.
Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Are there any, Mr. Town, CCD reports and referrals?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to draw the Commission's attention to your upcoming meetings, we did have to move the two cases that were tentatively scheduled for October 25th to November 8th because one of them, the Auto Mall case, was not complete in terms of being ready for hearing, principally with regard to landscape plan changes that we are in the process of making. And then the wireless case, the applicant agreed to relocate their hearing to November 8th as well. That's tentative. It could be pushed a little bit beyond that, but that's the target. November 22nd, as you can see, we have two cases tentative for that evening, and we also have another case that is currently tentative for your mid-December date as well. That's not shown on this schedule. And in addition to that, I should note that there were two appeals recently. The solar project that the Commission considered at your last meeting was appealed to the City Council, and so they will be considering that matter. This is for the solar panels in the front parking lot, and also the wireless communications facility that the Commission denied near Triunfa Park has also been appealed by that applicant to the City Council as well. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town. Do any of the commissioners have any AB 1234 reports that they'd like to make at this time? Okay. Commissioner Fisher, would you like to propose a motion for the approval of the minutes of September 27, 2010?
Move approval of the minutes September 27th, 2010.
Commissioner Adam, you have a question on the minutes?
Yes, I do, actually. Page 48, where we did talk about those solar panels. Carport arrays or solar panels are inappropriate, aesthetic impacts, etc. But if I recall the discussion, we all agreed strongly that we would encourage the applicant to look at the rooftop. Somehow that didn't get in there.
That's correct.
I would think for the council's benefit that we should have a sentence in there that states that.
Mr. Town, do you have some comments?
Yes, thank you.
Unless it's in there, maybe I missed it, but...
Well, let's see. I believe is in the minutes. And...
Well, I think it should be in the resolution.
Trying to put my finger on it.
Mr. Norman, do you have a comment?
Yes. If memory serves me right, the Planning Commission voted on this without any reference to that condition. We had discussion afterwards. I recall saying, I think Commissioner Adam wanted to open that up, but the vote had already taken place. And I stated that staff, in its staff report to council, will make it clear that the Planning Commission had an alternative site that it preferred. That's how I remember it happening. I hope that helps, Commissioner Adam.
Mr. Town.
Thank you. Just to augment Mr. Norman's comments, in the middle of page 38 of your packet, it's referenced in the minutes from the Commission's consideration of that matter, whereas motion by Commissioner Adam passed, etc. Based on the following finding, because obviously that was a finding for denial, with a recommendation that additional feasibility analysis be conducted of the library roof as an alternative location for solar panels. So staff included it in the minutes because it wasn't a specific finding for denial per se, but it was a recommendation, as Mr. Norman pointed out during or immediately after the Commission's discussion. So it is there. But it's not part of the findings for actual denial.
Commissioner Adam?
Is there a strong likelihood that the council will see this in the minutes then? Well, they'll see the motion, I presume, that was made, right?
Well, the City Council will see it in the minutes and also in staff's report to the City Council. We will highlight that point, as we have in previous discussions that involved recommendations to the Council from the Commission. We always highlight those in the staff report, in addition to whether they appear in the minutes or in an actual resolution.
All right. Well, I think we would all appreciate it if you do that.
Okay. Could we vote on the minutes, please?
Motion passed 5-0.
Any comments from my fellow commissioners? Commissioner Reynolds.
It seems like this group always talks about high school football, and my son played for Westlake. And not that I'm rah, but hey, guess who won the first game ever of Oaks Christian and Westlake High School? Westlake did. That's all.
You stole my thunder. Commissioner Lund.
As the registrar of voters for Ventura County, I just wanted to let folks know in the community that there's still time to request a vote by mail ballot. November 2nd is rapidly upon us, 20 days and some change, 23 to be exact. So remember to vote. Your vote is your voice.
Well, I'll add one additional thing, that this time of the year is the time that the Boy Scouts is selling popcorn, and I would encourage everyone to go ahead and purchase. What many people may not realize is that each one of these scouts is earning the money to actually pay themselves to go on different camping excursions that they go on. So it's wonderful if we can all support them. At this time, that we'll adjourn and come back here for our next regularly scheduled meeting on November 8th, 2010. Thank you and good evening.
variety of methods to get into cars. First and foremost, they're going to target the cars that are left unlocked. Other methods they use might be a Slim Jim or some kind of pry tool. They may even use a rock or a brick from your yard. One method that you wouldn't have thought of is a simple porcelain chip like this. Best way to avoid being a victim of this kind of crime: lock your car, but also remove the valuables before you go inside.